104 as much as I can maybe.
Yeah.
How's everybody's weekend?
Pretty good. Just got to hang out with the family. How about
Oh,
you?
yeah. I had barbecue ribs on my weekend, so it was pretty good.
Oh, nice. Now I'm craving some ribs.
Everybody's craving ribs, though.
Yeah. We'll just wait for like 2 more minutes before I start. Can you guys see that?
Yep.
Yep. Okay. I'll just start. Okay. Welcome to my presentation. Today we'll talk about game engineering. If you love games and have a passion for programming or creative thinking, problem solving, or putting things together, such as like a game concept and the structure of it, then you might find this interesting. You might not if you're not interested in all that. You're just find it boring, but hopefully I could get your attention for a bit and teach you a thing or two. The whole reason I looked into this was because when my team and I created like a little snippet of a game, it just occurred to me that oh, that's pretty cool, but I wonder what's more to it. Like it's it's not just the programming of it. There has to be more to it, like the game design, the sound of the game, and the artwork. So I thought, oh, there must be much more going on. So let me look into it more. So to start off, we have this video, some background information about engineering, but just to make it short and not so boring. The reason I had this video was to give you the idea of that game engineering is a thing, even though it sounds goofy, but it's a very interchangeable word. Well, basically, an engineer is someone who has like a person who like designs or builds or maintains a specific project, typically with a team of like-minded individuals. So, with that in mind, what is a game engineer? A game engineer is basically someone that works with a team of game designers, game artists, or animation artists, sound engineers to create a game. And that game can be any type of game you could think of. Just to have some reference, a game engineer can also be called a software engineer. This is basically the same thing since they work on creating software for a game. Or they could be called a programmer or even a computer scientist. So if you see me talking about either or, it's basically the same thing. And these are just some of the games that game engineering makes and develops. You can see from the variety of different genres. You have Pokemon, a JRPG, Halo Infinite, first-person shooter, or Civilization 6, which is just a strategy game, and you even got Minecraft sandbox game. Just just some reference. So, what are the things a game engineer do? Well, for starters, they develop games. They develop the different aspects of what goes in a game, how a character moves in them, etc. But they also add modifications to it to keep making updates to the game to make it more enjoyable for their users. They also have to constantly be testing the games because, for starters, there's always going to be bugs in the game, and they need to fix those bugs and document them so that in the future they could prevent that issue from ever occurring again. They also create basic software, not necessarily basic software, but the game engine. If you ever heard that term before, it's basically a specific software for games that helps modify their graphics, physics, and detects collisions for the game. So if you want a character to have a falling object fall from a certain distance, then you would use the game engine for that type of behavior. You also have a game engineer can also focus on the artificial intelligence behind the game. They need to know how to create an NPC that can think for itself because why would you want a static character that just like a dog that just stays there and doesn't do anything? Sometimes you need more interactive behavior around the environment to create that player. So they need to know some artificial intelligence, which if you ever heard that term before, I could explain it for a bit, which is basically the theory of computer systems to form related human behaviors. Behaviors such as perception of um, perception of eyesight or speech or decision making, because you're trying to make this being as lifelike as possible to have human intelligence. That's why it's referred to as artificial intelligence because you're programming that. Some game engineers even design games, but a game designer and a game engineer are two completely different things. But game engineers can also do that aspect of that work, which is level design or create the story of a game, the different types of characters and how they should be, or their behavior, or even the lore of the game, the whole story behind everything, which is just some of the things they do. So, how does one become a game engineer? Well, for starters, one needs to study 2D and 3D animation. You would think that they wouldn't need to know that a game artist would have to do with that, but they actually have to study the different types of 2D and 3D characters because they're working with a game artist constantly, and they need to know how to create specific code to make that character move in a certain way. So, for starters, one software that they would use would be called Sprite, which is for 2D sprites, and for 3D will be Adobe Animate for creating 3D characters. Another thing you would need would be a bachelor's degree or something higher, master's in computer science or game programming, or any related field. You would need to know computer languages such as C++, Java, JavaScript, or Python, and a little bit about each language for that reasoning is because there's specifications for such. If you want to focus on, let's say, PC and console game, creating those type of games, Then you need C++. Even though it's not the easiest to learn, it is well known among the game industry, and a lot of game companies are looking for that specific game engineer that can work with that language. It also offers the ability to control graphic processes and hardware performance. So, with that being said, it helps design the amazing graphics you see like in games like, let's say, Horizon or Dead by Daylight. If you've ever heard of those games, those are some games. So there's that for C++. If you're looking into C++, there's Java for mobile game development. A lot of companies use Java for creating mobile games because it's relatively easy to learn, write, and debug, and its platform is platform independent, which means it can run on any operating system. Then you have Python, which is usually, or from what I've heard, it's always used on data science, but it's a very intuitive and powerful, versatile language that can be used for a variety of different things. I have it listed here because Python has a specific library called Pygame, which is very useful for creating little snippets of games for design or building prototypes. And JavaScript is another language if you're looking to create web-based or browser-based games, because JavaScript is the main language you would use to make a website interactive with other peer languages such as HTML and CSS. There's a framework that JavaScript uses called Phaser.js, which is the go-to framework we would use for JavaScript building games, and it has a large support community. If you're ever interested in knowing how to deal with such problems and creating a game using that language. You also need to know some software engineering concepts in this field because you need to know every engineer in software deals with it, such as the agile philosophy and the Scrum framework. And you also need to have some good team skills because you're constantly collaborating with others. You're not the only person working on this project, which is a game. You're working with game artists, sound composers, and game designers. So you need to know how to collab with other people from different backgrounds, not just the technical side of it. Also, you need to be a good problem solver because you're constantly solving different problems within the game. So, what are some job duties that game engineers do? Well, I'm gonna lean into more about the game programmers. The other teams are not related to game engineering. So, to start off, in the game programmers, there's a set team within that team. I'll just explain because that part doesn't make sense. In that team of game programmers, there's a technical director, a lead programmer, engine programmer, and an AI programmer. And some people will say there's others called generalists. So your technical director is basically the person that runs the department. He creates a technical design of the game and how it should be laid out for the programmers to work on. And he makes sure that the project is technically and financially feasible. What I mean by that is that if they're if the client demands this type of game, that they make sure that it's possible, that the resources that they have in hand they can do it, and also if they have enough funds. Because if you don't have enough funds, well, how are you going to pay your workers, and how are you going to pay for the software you need and other resources that you need? They make sure that they make sure of all of that. They also deal with the programmers because to be a technical director, you need to have a good, you need to have 5 or more years of experience of coding too. So you need to be an adept and a good programmer to help the other entry level programmers. And yeah, they basically oversee the implementations of the whole game. Then you have your lead programmer, which is pretty self-explanatory. It's the person that is the leader of all the programmers. He or she constantly works with the technical director in hand. They manage the day-to-day tasks. Day-to-day tasks can be, let's say, for 1 week they decide, let's make this character walk. Then they make sure that in that week they make that character walk. Another thing that they do is they supervise the team because they're the leader of the programmer, so they need to make sure that their teammates are doing their job and constantly working on developing new features for the game. They also, since they're the lead programmer, they're more focused on the high level task of the job because entry level programmers will tend to not be able to do the difficult problems. So they have the lead programmer for that. Then you have your engine programmers in that team, which is basically the person that creates or alters or modifies game engines. As I mentioned before, a game engine is a software that is used for a lot of games to render graphics and the physics of the game and to detect collisions of different aspects. Then you have your AI programmers, artificial intelligence programmers that deal with the AI behavior for the game. They deal with the human-like behavior of NPCs and how they should decide on certain tasks, do decision building, and they constantly be working with game artists and game designers because they need to know the behavior of such characters so they can make that character have that type of intelligence. And finally, for the game programming team, you also have your generalists, which are basically a programmer that can do a variety of different roles. They could doesn't necessarily be have to be in the programming team. They can also do jobs specific to other teams in the design team or sound team, or even the art team. It's just someone that are very versatile. They can work with what they have, and they have very knowledgeable on different skill sets. So they could be both a lead programmer and engine programmer and AI programmer, or they could be engine programmer, lead programmer, or they can even be considered a game designer and an engine programmer. It's just someone that's very adept in different stuff. And for the other teams, your design team is basically groups of sound engineers or sound composers that just deal with the music of the game. The art team is people who design the 3D or 2D design, the character models, or the animation of the game. And then you have your design team, which is the people that develop the storyline, the characters, and rules of the game. They constantly work on designing storyboards or sketch out actions, specific actions, or work with the programming. They all work with each other. They constantly have to work with each other because the game that they're trying to make always be changing. And well, this is just a video I'll play that will make more sense on what I was trying to get at with the programming team.
I can't hear the video. Is it just me?
No, yeah, it's, you guys can hear it? No, we weren't.
I heard it when you first opened the video, and then it like cut off.
Because this microphone was on. For sharing videos, you're gonna need to share the tab specifically,
Okay.
and then click share audio.
Got it.
There's a good chance they think of programming. So it should come to no surprise that game programmers are among the highest paid positions in the game development career field, outside of management positions. A game programmer is a software engineer, programmer, or computer scientist who primarily develops code bases, game engine technology, tools, AI, or other related computer code for video games. They often work closely with the art team to determine the technical art and tools needed for the game development. There are several career paths in game programming such as technical director, lead programmer, engine programmers, artificial intelligence programmers, and generalist programmers. Technical director. Just as art director is the most coveted position amongst game artists, technical director is perhaps the most coveted position for game programmers. The technical director runs the programming department and creates the technical design for the project, overseeing its implementation throughout all phases of production, and selects the tools, hardware, and code standards. Additionally, some of the main roles of the technical directors are making sure the project is technically and financially feasible before starting, getting the right programmers onto the project once it begins, and helping those programmers solve problems once a project gets going. To become a technical director, you must be an experienced programmer or software engineer with a minimum of 5 to 10 years game industry programming, leadership, or management experience. Most studios will either promote internally or look for a candidate with existing experience. Lead programmer. The lead programmer supervises the programming team and is oftentimes involved in the daily programming process. But a lead programmer's main responsibility is managing the day-to-day tasks of the programming team. The lead also works closely with the technical director to determine what technologies and tools are needed in the game's development. In the cases where a technical director isn't part of the team, the lead programmer is responsible for setting the technical standards of the game. As a programmer, a lead will normally focus on high-level tasks, such as system design, and the many technical ways to implement all the features that will be featured in the game. A lead programmer usually has 5 years experience, with general knowledge of all the areas of game programming and technology. You'll also need good communication and time management skills to succeed in this position. Engine programmers. The game engine programmers create or alter the base engine of the game, which usually handles simulated physics, graphics display, and collision detection between objects. Many games on the market today use existing game engines, either commercial, open source, or free. In these cases, engine programmers will modify the engine to customize it for a particular game. Engine programmer isn't an entry-level position. Most companies require a minimum of 5 years professional experience or a master's degree in computer programming or computer science. An engine programmer must also be fluent in multiple programming languages and proficient with assembly and microcode programming for various CPU cores. Artificial intelligence programmers. The AI, artificial intelligence programmer, focuses on creating behaviors that give the impression of intelligent behavior. The AI is most commonly exhibited by the game's non-playable characters, or NPCs. Game AI involves creating code and algorithms to simulate logical response to stimulus, dynamic pathfinding, strategic planning, group movement and cooperation, and in some cases, interactive dialogue. During development, the AI programmers will work closely with the art and design teams to identify what behaviors and functionality are needed for the NPCs in the game. To become an AI programmer, you'll need at least a bachelor's degree in computer science, engineering, or computer programming. However, large game studios may require you to have a master's degree as well. An AI programmer should be comfortable writing code in multiple languages and enjoys challenging problem solving. AI programming is not an entry-level position. Even with an advanced degree, most companies require a minimum of 2 years professional experience. Generalist programmers. In the game development industry, programmers and artists are divided into 2 categories: specialists and generalists. While often not an official title, in many smaller studios or teams, one or more programmers and/or artists will often be described simply as a generalist. A generalist programmer is a programmer who can take on the various other programming roles as needed. Generalists are usually programmers who are adept in several areas of coding and able to easily switch between creating core game elements to AI or even the development of tools. Many indie or small studios don't have the capital to employ a specialist for each area of game programming or art, so skilled generalists are highly sought after to decrease the cost of development without decreasing the capability of the development team. This goes the same for large studios, who are constantly looking for a way to cut down development costs. A college degree in computer programming, computer science, or a similar field is required for this position. Additionally, you will need to be proficient in multiple scripting languages, as well as the ability to write code for multiple areas of game programming such as AI programming, physics programming, and gameplay scripting. There is no set years of experience to become a generalist programmer, but some large studios may require at least 2 years of prior experience in one or more specialized areas.
Does anybody have any questions so far?
I have one.
Yeah.
Is there like a certain level of importance when it comes to them, or is it like the equal all across the field, like in way how you sought after whichever one, whichever goal?
Wait, can you repeat your question?
Okay, this feedback's crazy. I have a hard time explaining it, but I'm basically asking like across all of the careers that you can have in it, are there equal or is there like a certain hierarchy of what you will try to go for?
There's a certain hierarchy typically with these type jobs. If you're basically being like the person directing the others people, you need to have like a lot of experience in coding, and also you're gonna get paid more for doing that. So, like for example, a technical director, he's the person that's considered the most adept in coding and have the most experience in that industry for gaming. So you need to have they'll be paid more than, let's say, an engine programmer or AI programmer. If that answers your question. All right. Anybody else? All right. If not, I'll just keep going. So as I mentioned before, you need to have know some engineering concepts, and for example, Scrum, which is a methodology of the Agile philosophy, Agile principles. So as I mentioned, the team before with the technical director, lead programmer, engine programmer, that specific game programming team. For example, here, your product owner will be your technical director, and your scrum master will be the lead programmer, and everybody else involved with that game project, the lead programmer, engine programmer, etc., is a team. So the point of the technical director is to talk with the client and what info they need to know, and then translate that information to the technical team, and that information would then be certain tasks that they need to be done for that project, which would be in the product backlog. So then they do the Scrum process where they have a sprint, which is just a deadline or 2-week deadline, whatever it may be, that they need to get something done based off the game that they need. Let's say they need to show that they made the characters walk or move, and they'll work on that. They keep working on that until the deadline comes, and then they present the information to the client and their technical director to see what they've done. They get feedback on it, and then with that feedback, they improve on what they need to improve on, and then they work on other tasks from the product backlog, and they keep doing that. It's an iterative process until they reach their potentially shippable product and they have the game that they need. That's just a very dumbed down way of explaining it. I know there's probably a lot more to it, but that's just a simple explanation. And this is just another example. You have your pre-production, your production, and post-production. The pre-production will obviously be the design of the game, the story of the game, anything that revolves around what the game should be. And then while you know what it should be, you have your production, which is your programmers, your artists, the 4 teams I mentioned before. They start implementing that process that needs to be done, and then they test it out, get feedback on it, and if they fail to deploy an actual product, then they repeat the whole process. Or if they need to alter things and change the story or the artwork or anything game aspect over how a character should move, they go back and keep doing this process until they get something shippable that can be shipped to the sales marketing team. Just another image. Just a video on what is Scrum, but I'll be skipping it. And right here is a live example of what game engineers do when they're discussing what needs to be done. This is based off the game Smite, and this is a live Scrum Manager example. They're working on a trouble board, and they have certain issues that need to be fixed for the game. They constantly have to be updating the game and fixing any new bugs that occurs to the game for their users that they feel that their users are complaining about, and they need to fix it to make the game enjoyable. One of the issues right here, you can see that clan tags are not visible in the game. So they have it as a top issue, and they'll soon fix it, and that's what the game engineering team is going to do. They're going to fix these issues. As you can see over here in the already fixed and live, they have fixed some issues that they probably had before. Let's say like with the mute button that is not functioning in the game. They fixed that, and the game should have a patch note related to that. This is what game engineers in some instances always have to deal with, and modifying the games and updating them constantly when it's say an online game, and the updates are pretty until the game dies out. So what is the job growth and salary? The salary range for game engineers really varies across the industry. That's based off because of responsibilities, your skill, your experience, and your location. Obviously, if you're in a metropolitan area, let's say around the east and west coast, like Cali, or even Washington, states that they're known for having a big game industry there, you're gonna get paid a little bit more than, let's say, in a small state, like in Oklahoma or something. You can get the price of how much you're gonna get paid varies on that, and that's the location. And then your skills, obviously, if you're software engineer, you're not gonna get paid as much as someone who has 10 years of experience. Also, but why I say the price range of your salary varies a lot is because on how you want to work. If you want to be a freelancer and work on the different projects you choose on, then you can get paid a decent amount. But let's say you want to be your own person and create your own game, and then you'll basically be hoping that game sells a lot, and that'll be based off your salary. Or let's say you want to work for an indie game company. Indie game company be a small company that's working on a little small game. Your salary can be very little compared to working for big companies such as Bethesda or Blizzard. Any big companies like that, you'll get obviously paid a lot more than working for a small company. So the salary of a game engineer I can't really give you an exact salary that they get paid, but it just constantly varies. You just have to have that in mind. Fun fact about the game industry actually is that it's actually worth like 151 billion today, and it's expected to grow to 250 by the 2025, which I thought that was pretty interesting. And it's yeah. Does anybody have any questions on this? If not, I'll continue. And this is just a little video to give you some insight of a person in this industry, software engineer / game engineer, which I think will be pretty good to know a different perspective, actual perspective of a person that deals with this type of stuff. Yeah, we can't see it or hear it. Ulysses. You can't see it? Not bad. It's just like showing it, but it's not playing, nor is it sound.
Today, we're going deep inside the digital realm to decode the mysterious world of video game programming. Hi, I'm Viviana.
I'm James.
James, nice to meet you. It's like such a fun place to work.
Oh yeah, it's a big playground over here.
What do you get to do here?
I'm a software engineer on an NHL franchise.
Nice, show me around.
Let's go. What we have to do is tell, your Xbox and your PS3 and your mobile device how to display the millions and millions of lines of code so that it can display a game on the screen. In high school, I took a programming course, an elective, and there we created a little blackjack game. And that is what made me realize, I want to do programming as a living, just being able to create software and being able to use it afterwards. I went to UBC. I took computer science, and along with the program, I did co-op education. This is where I was able to alternate between school and work. I got to work for several different high-tech companies. One of them was Electronic Arts. And after working there, I loved it, and I came back full-time once I graduated. This is my workstation over here. So I'll just code away, coding in C++, especially we look at the features that we planned for this year. I'll spend most of my day coding it. It has to match what happens in a real-life hockey game, so every detail counts. If something happens that shouldn't be happening, you definitely want to fix that. It's a long cycle. I figure out what problems there are, fix the problems, and the user picks up the control, plays the game, and feels like they're an actual hockey player.
How many people work on the NHL video game?
For NHL, it could range between 50 to 100 people.
You working your typical 9 to 5, or
It's usually there's like flex time. I do have a certain set of features I have to get done, so it's up to my own,
how
time.
fast you work?
That's correct.
Right.
The toughest part of my job is pretty much coming up with ideas for the next year, how to beat next year. So our biggest competitor is ourselves. If we release a really good game, how are we going to beat that for the next year?
What sort of skills or technical skills would you really need to have to do this job?
First, we need the program experience. We try a lot of things here at EA, good at coming up with creative solutions, and we can apply that to the future. You're looking at it here is just a player celebration.
One hand fist pump?
The one hand fist pump, so you want to just play it, make sure everything's correct. And once we're happy with it, we can put it into the game. We'd like to see that you have a strong passion for video game programming. Have good problem-solving skills, good teamwork skills, communication skills.
So you can't just be some dude who likes to play video games in his basement.
And you gotta have like a good programming background. I worked on body checking, and there a lot of physics and math is involved. So I had to pull out my physics book and see how a big guy hits a small guy, what happens to them.
Oh, wow.
So all the stuff I learned in school, all the math and physics, I'm glad I studied. I was able to use that and apply it to the game. Over here we have Crosby.
Body check.
Just body checking here. So there's the physics, takes into account what their poses are and how fast they're going. So what happens to the other player. I got a lot of experience working with a team, having good communication skills. Pretty much every job out there requires that skill set. If I were to move on from gaming, things like managers, anything that involves, leading a team or working with a team, I can see myself doing that. Just try new things, you'll never know, like, you'll enjoy it. You work hard in school, talk to professionals out there, ask them, what it's like in their field of work. This is something I'd be doing, for breathe. Don't tell anybody. You'll know when you're in the right job when it doesn't feel like a job. It feels like more like a hobby, something where you're excited to go to every day and to do every day, and then you hit the spot.
To summarize, some of the skills you'll need include finger dexterity, motor coordination, numerical ability. You'll also need to be detail-oriented, directive, innovative. You'll usually need 3 to 4 years of post-secondary education. The average salary can be over $66,000 per year. The future outlook for this job is promising as employment is increasing in the coming years and the unemployment rate is low and is expected to further decrease. James, thank you so much for teaching me all about being a software engineer.
Anytime. Okay, fine.
I sure did. I'm Viviana, and this is Career Track, reminding you that this career could be yours. See you next time.
Okay. I would actually disregard the last part of the video. That's actually different. You at least need a bachelor's degree, not 3 to 4 years. Just the last part of the video, I would just not really pay that much attention to. So, in conclusion, a game engineer is just an engineer that works with a variety of different teams, such as game artists and song composers and game designers to create a game. The things they do, they work on developing software for the games, such as the game engine, or artificial intelligence and the different game aspects of the game. Some skills that they need is to learn a variety of different computer languages skills. Typically you want to learn C++ because that's the best go-to language to learn. And you need to have good team skills because you're constantly collaborating with others. And the projected growth for this industry seems to be in a positive light because games always be in demand. Somehow there's always going to be people wanting to play games, so there's that. Some interesting things to note is that in this game industry, game engineers don't all the time deal with this type of industry. Sometimes they're in demand for the healthcare industry or military industry. Some examples would be like, let's say the military industry wants to hire some game engineers to create a simulation of how to fly a $1 billion jet airplane because they want their cadets to learn how to actually maneuver it and the different aspects of how to drive it because they don't want the pilots to, let's say, crash an expensive jet like that. Or in the healthcare industry, they want their newly trained surgeons to get a feel on how surgery works on a certain part of the body. So they'll ask a game engineer if they could design a game or simulation that could do that type of work. Some things to know, if in case you're wondering about how people get into this, is that for starters, one thing that would be good to do would just be creating a game. It can be any game, doesn't necessarily have to be specific. It could be something little, as a tic-tac-toe game, or something more complicated. You need to create some games and then make a portfolio for those games because a lot of companies are going to ask for a portfolio of all your work you've done and they want to know your process and how you've grown from, let's say, this year till 2024, and they want to see that you're engaged and you're actually improving on every year or every month on what you're trying to create a game. Another way of trying to get into this industry would be just getting a foot over the door, and the way that you can become a game tester for companies or an intern. If you can become that, you will have a more likely to get promoted to being a game engineer. But that's to say if you already have a bachelor's degree or higher and a related field that creates games. For just some things to note. And I have a Q&A in case anybody has any questions. I'll try to answer.
How do you think game programming compares to, say, business programming in like a hospital or legal industry?
How does it compare?
Yeah.
What exactly do you mean by that? Like, compare.
I mean, is it different at all? Or is programming for a game kind of the same as any other app in the world?
It's a software, so it's kind of you're basically just creating. Let's say in the healthcare industry, you want I think I mentioned create simulation for surgeons to know how to do surgery on, let's say, the heart. Then sometimes they will hire a game engineer to create that simulation, but they would have to be working with other surgeons to know the anatomy of the body or the heart and how it would work. So it's pretty interesting to think about how different people from different backgrounds can work and create different things. I would say, if that kind of answers the question. I don't think it does.
Sounds good to me. Thanks.
Anybody else?
I have a question. I'm not really sure if you probably know the answer to this or if you covered it, but do you know what kind of like games take the longest or like are most difficult to create a program? For example, for a shooter and RPGs, stuff like that.
Yeah, I know for an RPG, if you want to create, let's say, good RPG without any mistakes on it, you don't want a game like from 2077 that have a bunch of glitches in it. It takes a lot of years, a lot of dedication too. If you ever play any Elder Scroll games, they make those games like every 5 or 6 years, and they keep increasing in the amount of years they take that company to make them. So it all depends on what type of game you're making. Obviously, if you're RPG, it's gonna take a long time to make that game. But if you're making a little small indie game, let's say if you guys ever played Game Beast, it could take a lot less time to make that game. It just depends on the complexity of the game design that they're trying to do. Anybody else?
How much experience have you had?
Have I had?
Yeah, before you came to Seneca.
What makes you say that? I mean, I've had, say, I wouldn't say a lot. Well, it started when I was junior in high school, a little bit before to software, just want to learn different languages. The first language I picked up was Java.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, I just started teaching myself a little bit more about Python and a little bit of C#.
Interesting. Very good. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody else? If nobody else wants to have a question, I think that's pretty much it from my presentation. I think I could have covered a little bit more. Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. Yeah, that concludes my presentation. If Warren has anything else to add.
Nope.
Okay.
Super interesting, Yuli. Thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I hardly bored you guys, not gonna lie.
No, it was very interesting. Yeah.
I mean, I try to make the presentation not so where I just read off a slide and just have paragraphs after paragraph on the slide, because I wasn't. For starters, when we were doing work on how to create an outline on a presentation, that was one of the things they told us not to do. And I remember back in school too, I would get we were pretty harsh on how a person would present. The less words they would say, the better. And it was rehearsed better too. So okay. I think that's pretty much it. You guys can leave if you want. Yeah, thank you.
Good job. Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Yuli. Thanks.
Have a nice one.
You too.
Our birthday is
All right, bye.